This fictional story follows Kody Brown and Robyn Brown as their ordinary drive toward the city turns into a life-altering moment. During a routine police checkpoint, illegal drugs are found in Kody Brown's pocket, leading to his arrest. The news spreads rapidly, shocking fans and turning public admiration into anger, disappointment, and rejection. As the case moves to court, Kody is sentenced to a $1 million fine and 6 months in jail. While Kody faces isolation, loss of identity, and deep self-reflection behind bars, Robyn struggles outside with shame, financial pressure, and the slow collapse of public support. Friends disappear, routines change, and both are forced to confront the consequences of choices they once ignored. Inside jail, Kody learns that punishment is not just confinement but clarity, understanding how small decisions, unchecked habits, and silence led to irreversible outcomes. Outside, Robyn realizes how avoidance and comfort allowed problems to grow unnoticed. After serving his sentence, Kody returns home changed, not redeemed, but aware. Together, they rebuild a quieter life, without excuses, without entitlement, accepting that trust once broken may never fully return. The story ends not with forgiveness or glory, but with acceptance, accountability, and the understanding that consequences do not disappear, they are carried forward. They were driving toward the city just as the light began to fade. Not night yet. Not day anymore. That quiet in-between hour where the road feels longer than it is. Kody Brown kept his eyes forward, one hand on the steering wheel, the other resting near the center console. The city skyline grew closer, buildings rising slowly out of the haze. Robyn Brown sat beside him, scrolling through her phone, half listening to whatever Kody had been saying moments earlier. Traffic slowed. Red and blue lights flashed ahead. Kody sighed. "Looks like a checkpoint," he said. Robyn glanced up. "Again?" They rolled forward with the rest of the cars, inch by inch. Police officers moved between vehicles, calm, methodical, routine. No urgency. No aggression. Just procedure. When it was their turn, an officer stepped up to the window. "License and registration," he said politely. Kody handed them over. The officer leaned slightly closer, his eyes scanning the interior of the car. Not searching. Observing. "Where are you headed?" the officer asked. "Into the city," Kody replied. "Dinner. Meeting someone." The officer nodded. "Any substances in the vehicle?" he asked, his tone neutral. Kody's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "No," he said quickly. The officer paused. "Not long. Just long enough." "Sir," he said, "I'm going to need you to step out of the vehicle." Robyn's heart skipped. "Is there a problem?" she asked. "Just a routine check," the officer replied. "Please remain in the car, ma'am." Kody opened the door and stepped out, forcing a calm expression onto his face. He stood with his hands at his sides as another officer approached. "Do you have anything on you we should know about?" the second officer asked. "No," Kody said again. The officer gestured lightly. "Mind if we check your pockets?" Kody hesitated. Just a fraction of a second. That fraction was enough. The officer reached forward. The sound of fabric shifting felt louder than it should have. Then the officer stopped. He pulled something out. A small packet. Clear. Unmistakable. The world seemed to tilt. Robyn saw it from the car window. Her breath caught in her throat. "That's not—" she started, opening the door. "Ma'am, stay in the vehicle," an officer said firmly. Kody stared at the packet in the officer's hand. "This isn't what it looks like," he said, his voice suddenly dry. The officer didn't respond. He simply looked at him. And that look said everything. Within minutes, the situation had changed. Not dramatically. Not violently. But completely. Kody was placed in handcuffs. Robyn stood on the sidewalk, her hands shaking, her phone forgotten on the car seat. People nearby had stopped pretending not to watch. Someone recognized them. A whisper spread. A phone camera lifted. By the time they were escorted into the police vehicle, The moment already belonged to the public. The news didn't take long. It never does. Headlines formed faster than explanations. Photos circulated. Clips replayed. Speculation exploded. Fans who once defended them began asking questions. Not quietly. Loudly. Is this real? How long has this been going on? We trusted them. Statements were released. Lawyers were contacted. But the damage moved faster than any response. By morning, everyone knew. Sponsors pulled back. Support turned into silence. Silence turned into disgust. Robyn sat alone at home, staring at the television as analysts spoke with certainty they didn't need to earn. Kody Brown was arrested last night, sources confirm. This changes everything. She muted the screen. Her hands trembled. Not because of the noise. Because of what she knew was coming next. Court. Judgment. Consequences. And the kind of shame that doesn't fade with time. The holding cell was quiet. Not silent. Just stripped of distraction. Kody sat on the narrow bench, his back against the cold wall, his wrists still marked red where the cuffs had been. Time moved differently there. Slower. Thicker. Every sound echoed too much. Every thought stayed too long. He replayed the moment again and again. The pause. The pocket. The look on the officer's face. He told himself he should have said something sooner. He told himself he should have handled it differently. But none of that mattered now. Across town, Robyn sat at the kitchen table, her phone buzzing nonstop. Messages from friends she hadn't heard from in years. Messages from people she didn't recognize at all. Some asked questions. Some demanded answers. Some didn't hide their anger. She didn't respond to any of them. She stared at the wall instead, listening to the clock tick louder than it ever had before. When Kody was released on bail later that night, he didn't speak much. Neither did Robyn. The drive home felt longer than the drive into the city had earlier that evening. No radio. No conversation. Just the road. At home, Kody sat down heavily, running his hands through his hair. This got out of control fast, he said quietly. Robyn didn't answer right away. When were you going to tell me? She asked. Kody looked up. I didn't think I had to, he replied. It wasn't supposed to be a thing. Robyn's lips pressed together. That's what scares me, she said. That you didn't think it mattered. The days that followed were relentless. Court dates scheduled. Lawyers consulted. Public statements drafted and redrafted until they sounded empty no matter how carefully the words were chosen. Fans reacted with intensity. Some defended him at first, insisting on innocence, blaming misunderstandings, claiming exaggeration. But as details emerged, that defense weakened. Disappointment replaced loyalty. People who once admired him felt betrayed. This isn't who we thought he was. You don't get to preach values and live like this. I'm done supporting them. The words cut deeper than insults ever could. Because disappointment carries expectation inside it. Robyn felt it everywhere she went. At the grocery store, conversation stopped when she entered an aisle. At the cafe, a barista avoided eye contact. Online, comments multiplied faster than she could scroll. She stopped checking. Kody prepared for court in silence. He listened as his lawyer explained the likely outcome. The evidence was straightforward. There was no dramatic defense. No clever escape. This won't disappear, the lawyer said calmly. The best outcome is damage control. Kody nodded. For the first time, he understood that control was no longer his. The courtroom felt smaller than he expected. Not physically. Emotionally. He stood as the charges were read. The words sounded distant, like they belonged to someone else. But they didn't. They belonged to him. The judge listened without expression. Facts were stated plainly. No theatrics. No commentary. When the sentence was delivered, the room seemed to exhale. A $1 million fine. 6 months in jail. Robyn felt her knees weaken. Kody closed his eyes briefly. 6 months. It sounded short. It wasn't. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited. Cameras flashed. Questions were shouted. Kody didn't answer any of them. Robyn kept her head down. That night, their house felt unfamiliar. Like a place they no longer fit inside. They sat on opposite sides of the room, surrounded by silence again. But this silence was different from the one after the arrest. This one carried certainty. "I never thought it would end like this," Robyn said quietly. Kody didn't respond. Because he didn't know how to explain something he didn't fully understand himself. The next morning, the sentence began. The doors closed behind him with a sound he would never forget. And for the first time in a long while, there was nothing left to argue against. Only time. The first night inside was the hardest. Not because of fear. Because of stillness. Kody lay on the narrow bed staring at the ceiling, its cracks forming patterns he couldn't stop following with his eyes. The sounds around him were unfamiliar but constant. Footsteps, distant voices, metal doors opening and closing. Nothing aggressive. Just permanent. He realized then that freedom isn't loud when it leaves. It's quiet. Outside, Robyn woke up alone for the first time in years. The bed felt larger than it should have. Colder. She reached for her phone out of habit, then stopped. There was no one to update. No one to explain things to. Everything had already been decided. She made coffee she didn't drink and sat by the window watching the street come alive. Cars passed. People went to work. Life continued with cruel efficiency. Inside the jail, days were structured down to the minute. Wake up. Line up. Eat. Wait. Kody learned quickly that time behaved differently there. Minutes dragged. Hours blurred. Days stacked on top of each other until they felt indistinguishable. No one cared who he used to be. No one asked? That anonymity was heavier than recognition ever was. He listened more than he spoke. Heard fragments of other lives. Mistakes made once, mistakes repeated, mistakes that started small and grew quietly. At night, he thought about Robyn. Not about the fans. Not about the money. About the silence he had left her in. Robyn tried to keep busy. She handled paperwork. Sold things that no longer felt necessary. The fine loomed like a shadow. $1 million wasn't just a number, it was weight. Decisions had to be made. Assets reevaluated. Comforts surrendered. Each signature felt like another acknowledgement of reality. Friends stopped calling. Not all at once. Gradually. Some didn't know what to say. Some didn't want to say anything at all. She stopped blaming them. Shame isolates efficiently. Weeks passed. Kody marked time by routine instead of dates. He learned which hours were loud, which were quiet. Which faces were hardened, which still carried softness underneath. One man told him, "You don't end up here because of one choice. You end up here because you ignore the early ones." That stayed with him. Robyn visited when she could. The glass between them made conversation feel artificial. Words lost weight traveling through phones instead of air. "You look thinner," she said once. "So do you," he replied. They avoided talking about the future. It felt too fragile to touch. Outside, public opinion settled into something colder than outrage. Indifference. People moved on. New scandals replaced old ones. New stories took attention away. But the damage didn't fade just because eyes turned elsewhere. It remained. Quietly. Halfway through the sentence, Kody stopped counting days. Not out of strength. Out of exhaustion. He focused instead on what was directly in front of him. The next hour. The next meal. The next conversation that didn't ask who he used to be. Robyn learned to sleep alone. Learned which nights were harder. Learned how silence can be both a punishment and a teacher. Sometimes she imagined the moment he would come home. Other times she wondered who would walk through that door. The city outside kept moving. But for them, time had narrowed. It no longer stretched forward endlessly. It pointed inward. Time inside did not heal. It clarified. Kody began to notice patterns in himself that he had never questioned before. How quickly he used to dismiss discomfort. How easily he convinced himself that small risks didn't count if they stayed hidden. In a place where nothing could be hidden for long, those habits felt exposed. He wasn't treated harshly. He wasn't treated gently. He was treated neutrally. That neutrality stripped away excuses. He started writing. Not letters. Notes. Short sentences meant only for himself. Things he didn't want to forget when the noise of life returned. I ignored warning signs. I mistook control for safety. I assumed consequences belonged to other people. Some days he tore the paper up after writing. Other days he kept it folded under his mattress. Robyn adjusted to a different kind of life outside. She learned how quickly routines change when money becomes a calculation instead of a cushion. Every purchase carried a question. Every decision had weight. She downsized quietly. No announcements. No explanations. Each item she sold felt like closing a chapter she hadn't chosen to write. People still recognized her, but less often now. When they did, the reactions varied. Some looked away. Some stared too long. A few offered sympathy that felt awkward and incomplete. She accepted all of it without response. At night, she replayed moments she hadn't questioned before. Conversations that felt harmless at the time. Choices she hadn't pushed back against. Silences she had mistaken for peace. She wondered how many times she had known something was wrong and chosen comfort instead of confrontation. Inside, Kody saw men leave. Some cried. Some smiled too hard. Some said nothing at all. Release didn't look like relief. It looked like uncertainty. That scared him more than staying. He realized that consequences didn't end when doors opened. They followed. They reshaped. He tried to imagine his return. The house. The streets. The eyes. He stopped trying after a while. Imagination made time heavier. Instead, he focused on listening. Not to stories meant to impress or intimidate, but to the quiet truths people shared when they had nothing left to protect. One man said, I spent years pretending I was fine. Jail didn't break me. Honesty did. Kody believed him. Robyn received a letter one afternoon. Not from Kody. From someone who used to be a fan. It wasn't angry. It wasn't cruel. It was disappointed. I looked up to you both. It read. I don't anymore. But I hope you understand why. Robyn folded the letter carefully and placed it in a drawer. Disappointment, she realized, was heavier than hate. It meant something had mattered. Months passed. The fine was paid in parts. Each payment reduced numbers on paper but increased reality in her mind. There was no pretending this was temporary anymore. It was permanent. A mark that wouldn't fade just because time passed. When Kody's release date finally approached, he didn't feel excitement. He felt apprehension. He had changed, but he didn't know if change would be recognized or rejected. He wondered if accountability ever ended or if it simply became quieter. The night before his release, he lay awake again, staring at the same ceiling he had memorized months earlier. This time, the stillness didn't frighten him. It instructed him. Outside, Robyn cleaned the house slowly. Not to prepare it. To understand it. To see what still belonged and what no longer fit. She didn't decorate. She didn't plan. She waited. Not for the man he used to be. For the man who would arrive. The morning of his release came quietly. No announcement. No ceremony. Just a door opening at a scheduled hour. Kody stepped outside carrying a small bag that held everything he was allowed to leave with. The air felt different. Not fresher. Just wider. Too wide. For a moment he stood still. No one was waiting with signs. No cameras. No voices calling his name. That absence felt deliberate. Robyn waited in the car a short distance away. She didn't step out when she saw him. She stayed seated, hands resting on the steering wheel, watching him approach. He looked older. Not dramatically. But honestly, when he opened the door and sat down, neither of them spoke right away. The car felt unfamiliar, like a space they both had to relearn. "You okay?" she asked finally. "I don't know yet," he replied. She nodded. That answer felt truthful. The drive home was slow. Not because of traffic. Because neither of them wanted to rush into whatever came next. Buildings passed. Streets they remembered looked the same. That unsettled him more than if they had changed. The world had moved on without needing permission. At the house, Robyn unlocked the door and stepped aside. She let him enter first. Not as a gesture of respect. As an acknowledgement that he needed to feel the space again. He set the bag down and looked around. Some things were gone. Others had moved. Nothing felt staged. That mattered. They sat at the table where so many conversations had once ended unfinished. "I paid the last portion," Robyn said quietly. "The fine is done." Kody nodded. "Thank you," he said. Not out of politeness. Out of awareness. They talked carefully. Not about blame. Not about forgiveness. About logistics. About what still needed fixing. About what could not be undone. At one point, Robyn asked, "Do you regret it?" He didn't answer immediately. "Yes," he said eventually. "But regret isn't enough." She waited. "I regret not stopping earlier," he continued. "I regret assuming I could manage consequences instead of avoid them." She looked down. "I regret not asking harder questions," she said. They sat with that. No argument followed. In the days that came after, Kody avoided public spaces. Not out of fear. Out of respect. He didn't want attention. He didn't feel entitled to re-entry. When he did go out, reactions were mixed. Some people didn't recognize him. Some did and said nothing. A few looked at him with open disapproval. He accepted all of it. Robyn noticed the difference in him more than anyone else. He paused before speaking. He listened without preparing defenses. He no longer filled silence with certainty. That made the house quieter. Not emptier. Quieter. Weeks passed. They rebuilt routines slowly. Not the old ones. New ones. Smaller. More deliberate. Kody found work that didn't come with recognition. That was intentional. He wanted accountability without audience. Robyn supported him without shielding him. They learned what support looked like when it didn't erase responsibility. Sometimes, late at night, the weight returned. The knowledge that some people would never forgive. That trust once broken doesn't always regenerate. Kody accepted that. He understood now that consequences weren't meant to be escaped. They were meant to be carried. One evening, as they sat quietly, Robyn said, "Do you think people will ever see you differently?" Kody thought for a long time. "I don't think that's up to me," he said. "I think what's up to me is not needing them to." She nodded. That was the clearest answer he had given in months. Life didn't become easier. It became clearer. And clarity, he learned, was heavier than denial, but far more stable. They didn't reclaim what was lost. They adjusted to what remained. And in that adjustment, something settled. Not redemption. Not reward. Acceptance.